Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Forestry podcast. I'm your host, Seth Stephenson, the communications coordinator with the Arkansas Forestry Association. And before I introduce my guest this month, I want to make sure we thank our sponsors, Data Scout Pro. Thank you to Data Scout Pro for their support of this episode. We're going to hear a little bit more from them later on in the show. But now we're going to get to our topic this month and our guest. Today I'm sitting down with Congressman Bruce Westerman, the only, and correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, the only registered forester in Congress. Is that correct still?
That's correct.
Awesome.
It's been that way ever since I got there.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me today.
It's always good to get back to Arkansas and talk forestry, and glad to be with you, Seth. Looking forward to our discussion.
And hopefully this will be a little less stressful than the work you're doing on Capitol Hill. We know we're just having a nice, friendly chat today.
Trees are relaxing, except when you talk about trees and federal policy, so it may get a little tense here.
Well, I'll try to keep my emotions in check today, so we should all be good. Well, Congressman, what we like to do here at the beginning, especially with a new guest, is have you kind of explain your background. So could you kind of tell people who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I'm Bruce Westerman. I grew up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Was born and raised there. Went to high school there, except for going away to college. Lived there pretty much my whole life. I grew up in forest, hunting and fishing from the earliest things I can remember. So I've always had a natural love for forestry. And I have to always remember a mentor of mine who was my childhood Sunday school class teacher, a guy named Conley Culpepper, who was a World War II veteran, flew on the Flying Fortresses in the Bloody 100th. You would never know that just by talking to him, but he was definitely a war hero. But he came back from World War II and went to UAM and was in the first graduating class from the forestry school at UAM. Oh, wow. And he had a long career in forestry. With the Dirks Forest Products Company, with Weyerhaeuser for a while, and then he had his own consulting firm. But, I spent a lot of time with Mr. Culpepper, hunting with him, just a friend of the family. He had 7 sons, and some of them were close to my age. So I was always amazed that he knew everything about the forest, not just the trees, not just being able to identify the trees of Arkansas, but any kind of grasses or plants, and he knew everything about wildlife, and I was always amazed by that. So I wanted to go to forestry school someday. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Arkansas and studied engineering, and was able to go back and go to Yale University for forestry school. Okay.
And so I guess Mr. Culpepper was the main reason that you got to where you are, or got into the forestry.
He definitely gave me an interest in forestry. When I was in high school, I was in FFA, and I took ag classes on forestry, so I had a little bit of an understanding of forestry. And like I said, I was around forest all my life, and also, a lot of other people that I knew were in the forestry business, because that's big stuff in Arkansas and in Hot Springs and around that area.
So, and we may have to, we'll see how this goes here, but is there a memory or maybe a story with him that you remember very vividly, or the one that stands out the most from your days, maybe hunting, or, at the end of Sunday school or something?
Yeah, well, I remember he used to, he would take us to Lake Ouachita to go swimming or whatever, and we would fish together too, but I can remember being out fishing with Mr. Culpepper, and we were on Lake Ouachita, and he's one of the people that cruised the timber before the lake was built. So you'd be out there in a boat, and he'd be telling you about all these stories when they marked the timber and when they logged it, and he'd be telling about there was an old field here and a fence line, and you could, with the dead timber, you could visualize where all of those places were, and he told stories about wild goats getting trapped up on some of the islands when the lake flooded. Just amazing things he would tell, and he was talking about it like it was yesterday, when he was out cruising that timber.
Okay. So after you went to college, you worked with a couple of different places before you became a congressman, correct?
Well, my first job out of college was with Riceland Foods down in Stuttgart. I was the plant engineer, was there about 2 years. Got a chance to move back to Hot Springs and go to work at Mid-South Engineering Company, which is a member of AFA. So I've been very familiar with AFA for a long time. And we did engineering work in the forest products sector. People ask me, what did you do before you got to Congress? I said, well, we basically designed factories that made things out of trees. So everything from lumber to plywood to OSB and MDF, and even some work on paper mills. So I had a pretty thorough knowledge of what it takes to supply the resources that come from our forest. So it was a great experience that I had there at Mid-South.
And I have to ask the obligatory ask, I guess, what drew you to AFA? Was it a required thing with Mid-South, or did you see something that you kind of came to us on your own? Because you've been a member for a while, and you're also on our board currently.
Right. It was just, it's part of doing business. We worked really all over the world, especially in the Southeast, anywhere where southern pine's grown. So, we wanted to stay informed with the things that were going on, and AFA was a great place for us to keep up with what was happening in our industry. We attended a lot of meetings across the country, but as far as what was happening here in Arkansas with forestry, AFA was the place to be.
Okay.
It's a tight community too. So,
yeah.
You get to know everybody, and still today, when I get to go to an AFA meeting, it's like we would say old home week. You're back visiting with friends.
Yeah, you're not just a congressman at that point. You're part of the group, one of the gang almost. Everyone's very friendly and welcoming.
Right.
When you get the opportunity to join us at stuff like that. So I guess I'm asking all of this and trying to get your background and stuff to show your history in the forestry community. But I guess when you were first elected to Congress back in 2014, you worked as an elected official here in the state for a little bit before then. But when you were first elected to Congress, what was important to you at that time?
Well, from a policy standpoint, Congress touches everything, more so than I even realized when I was running. So, on the big picture, I want to look at how do we make Congress, or how we make the federal government more effective, how we hopefully shrink the size of the government and the influence that it has in our lives, and give the private sector more opportunities to do what the private sector does best. When I got to Congress, I found that I was one of 12 engineers and the only forester there. So, if you go into Congress with some expertise, people recognize that and they want you to work on those issues. So I ended up on the Transportation Committee and on the Natural Resources Committee. And I've been very blessed in my service. I'm actually serving as the ranking member on the Natural Resources Committee now. If Republicans win the majority this November, I'll get to be the chairman of that committee. Okay. And I came to Congress at a time when we're seeing unprecedented wildfires and insect and disease infestation on federal lands. So there's a lot of important issues that come before our committee, and important forestry-related issues that I've had a wonderful opportunity to work on those.
So I guess if real quick, because you're touching on something too that I want to get to before we wrap up today, but when you found out that you were the only forester because that's a large group of folks that you're working with, but that you were the only forester, what was that like? I guess was there a sense of maybe responsibility that you felt at that time when you learned that okay, I got some work to do here? Yeah,
responsibility and a lot of opportunity. And John Boehner was speaker when I first went to Congress. Paul Ryan ended up being the speaker, and I tell a funny story about I started to back up a group called the Working Forest Caucus, and this looks really at our private working forest across the country. Great group, even a lot of bipartisan work in that group. But I go to the gym in the mornings, and Paul Ryan was always in the gym, and we were back at the sink shaving, getting ready for the day. I said, Paul, you should join the Working Forest Caucus. And he just looked at me funny. He said, well, why is that? I said, well, it's a good caucus, a lot of members in it. And I could tell he was puzzled, and he said, well, what kind of workforce? Like workforce development? I said, not workforce, working force. And he just looked at me, and I said, forest, like trees. He went, oh. He said, in Wisconsin, forest has 2 syllables in it. So he started. He still today, if I talk to him, he'll call me Forrest.
There you go.
But I'll take that.
I was about to say, there's worse things to be called for sure, you know.
Yeah. So I had the Speaker of the House that he understood that forests were important, and he had somebody there in Congress that could work on that. So it's it opens a lot of doors to work on issues. Mm-hmm. Really, when you start talking about conservation and all the concern about the environment today, forests are the linchpin in that. Mm-hmm. You know, we measure environmental health through air quality and water quality, and forests play an integral role in both of those. So it gives me an opportunity to advocate on behalf of forests, and not just forests on federal lands, but also private forests. Those working forests that we have here in Arkansas and across the country are something we can all be very proud of. They supply all kinds of products that make our economy strong. They also provide a lot of jobs, and they provide tremendous benefits to the environment. So hats off to all the people working in the forest industry, you know, all across this great country. We've got a lot of work we need to do to make improvements, especially on federal lands, but we know how to do it. And, you know, I say it's as good as it gets right here in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. We've got a great group working across party lines, working across industry and advocacy lines. You know, I brought a member of Congress here on a kind of an exchange trip, and we had the Forestry Association, the loggers, the Nature Conservancy, and the Forestry Commission. We were all sitting at the table, and they were all singing off the same sheet of music. And my friend from California was just amazed that you would have industry and environmental groups talking about how when we work together, it's better for the forest and better for our economy and the environment here in Arkansas.
And I know that's a sense of pride that we have here, and I'm sure that you've shared with your colleagues that we are all working together and all have the same message to tell, and we're not butting heads with each other trying to get our own, I guess, leg up on whatever we're trying to do. Right,
and that crosses over. You know, there's a lot of Ouachita National Forest and Ozark National Forest, not only in Arkansas, but in my district. I've got about 2 million acres of federal land in the 4th District. And we've had some very good leadership on those forests. I'm sorry to see my friend Troy Hethiker, he's been promoted to D.C. He'll be moving up there, which is good in a way because he's moving higher up in the Forest Service. But he's done a tremendous job out on the Ouachita, and he's worked very well with Joe Fox, and they're putting together some exciting stuff using the Good Neighbor Authority that we approved in Congress to be able to do a lot more management on the Ouachita, which is, I say, the best managed national forest in the system. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on it. Anybody that's familiar with the forest knows that, but there's a lot of good work that's been done on it, especially out of the short-leaf pine blue stem grass restoration project, where we're now trapping red-cockaded woodpeckers and relocating them to other places because that project has been so successful. And really, if we could make the entire Ouachita National Forest look like that, I think we would be ahead in a lot of different areas because that's really what the forests looked like before Europeans got here. Some of the earliest European explorers wrote in their journal that you could ride a horse at full gait through the Ouachita National Forest. You had wild bison and elk and a lot of wildlife there. And with the demand for access to public lands for recreation like hunting and hiking and mountain biking, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity on the public lands that we have here in Arkansas to make them even better than they are and create more opportunities for more people to enjoy.
Okay. Well, Congressman, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick pause right here so we can hear from our sponsors this month, Data Scout Pro. We'll be back on the other end of this sponsorship. Data Scout Pro is your source for county land records and GIS data. Search anytime, anywhere through their sophisticated search engine or the new DS Pro app available in the Apple App Store. Utilize their analysis tools while browsing millions in Arkansas and Oklahoma records. Visualize the data on their advanced interactive mapping system. Access all of these features from your office, home, or mobile device. They feature data for all 75 Arkansas counties and 77 Oklahoma counties and provide more data updates than their competitors. Go pro today at datascoutpro.com. All right, thank you once again to Data Scout Pro for their sponsorship of this month's episode. So, Congressman Westerman, we've kind of talked a lot about your history, and I want to get into some of the stuff that you're working on currently. So can you talk about some of the legislation that you've been kind of focused on here over the past couple months or even years?
Yeah, there's a lot of legislation that we're working on, and I'll keep it kind of to the forestry realm. Our committee deals with energy and minerals, and we've got a huge energy crisis in our country. Also, we've got a huge mining crisis in our country. But when I look at the work that we've done on forestry, I'm excited about some of the opportunities ahead. I'll highlight one bill. Mm-hmm. It's called the Save Our Sequoias Act, and I think it offers a lot of opportunity for federal lands across the country. A lot of people don't realize this, but in the past 2 years, we've burned up about 20% of the giant sequoias that only grow on about 37,000 acres on approximately 70 groves on the western slopes of the Sierra Nevadas, usually above 4,500 feet in elevation. Very distinct sites that these sequoias grow on. That's the only place they grow in the world, and they're actually the most iconic tree on the planet. If you look at the Park Service's emblem, they have the giant sequoia on the emblem, and everybody pretty much knows about them or have heard about them. And back when I was in forestry school, if you had told us that we were going to destroy 20% of the giant sequoias with fire, people would laugh because everybody thought these trees were pretty much impervious to fire. But we've had getting close to a century and 3/4, or almost a century and a half of mismanagement on these sequoia groves. A lot of academic research showing that for hundreds of years, and again, these trees can be 3,200 years old, but for centuries, they were averaging about 31 fires per century on the grove. After the gold rush in California, the Native Americans quit burning, and then the Forest Service came along in the early 1900s, and they started putting out all the fires. So as a result, in the 20th century, those groves averaged 3 fires. And you've got these shade-tolerant white fir trees that grow up in the understory that the fires used to knock them back. Mm-hmm. But with the fire suppression, these trees are over 100 years old now, and the tips of them are up in the lower crowns of the sequoias. So when the fire finally got there, these trees served as ladder fuel, got the flames up in the crowns of the sequoias, and that's what killed them. I made a trip out there in May, and entire groves of giant sequoia trees just matchsticks, charred matchsticks. It was heartbreaking to see these huge trees destroyed by fire. The Forest Service said up until that point, the only record they had of a monarch sequoia being destroyed by fire was in 1267, wow. Which we all know trees are a living history book. Mm-hmm. They tell you a story. So I went to Kevin McCarthy because 64 of these 70 groves are in his district. And this was probably about a year ago, and I said, we've got to do something for these sequoia trees or we're going to lose them. I said, these are the most iconic trees on the planet. Mm-hmm. He was all for it, and I said, it's got to be bipartisan. I said, this can't be a partisan issue. And he said, well, you work on it and let me know what you got. I ended up making a long trip all halfway around the world and back on a Codell with some Democrat senators and Democrat members of the House, and I had them captured on an airplane, so I had all my research papers, and I'd just sit down by them and say, look what's happening to the sequoia trees. And, they got it. Mm-hmm. And a guy named Scott Peters, a Democrat from San Diego, an environmental lawyer, he said, we've got to do something to fix this. So we planned a field hearing. We had 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats went out in May to the sequoia groves. And as a result of that, we came up with this Save Our Sequoias Act. It's got 25 Republican, 25 Democrat co-sponsors. and I've got high hopes that we may get it signed into law by the end of the year.
Awesome.
And it's really how policy should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And the exciting thing is this is kind of a no-brainer when it comes to forestry. It's not a hard sell on what needs to be done. You need to cut these white fir trees and cut some sugar pine trees out so that you don't have the ladder fuels, and you're not really doing anything to the giant sequoias. So as a result, we got the Nature Conservancy, the Environmental Defense Fund, Save the Redwoods League, and about 80 or 90 other groups that have written support letters for our bill. Now, there's still some far left groups that are opposing this science-based management out there on the forest. But I'm excited about it, because if we can show that we can be good stewards and manage in these giant sequoia groves, I mean, they're on national park. They're on Forest Service, the Tule River Tribe, and the state of California is where all these groves are located. So if we can do that across a broad sector of land ownerships and show something good happens, then maybe people will say, well, why don't we do this to the rest of the forest in the West that are burning up?
Well, that brings me kind of, as we get close to wrapping up here, that kind of brings me to my next question is, like we said, here in Arkansas, we all kind of sing the same song of proper forest management, and that's obviously not the case in other parts of even the USA. But have you seen progress with other states or with other Congress people in trying to help them to know proper forest management, what that means, and how beneficial it is to
it's an educational process, and there's no better way. That field trip we made to Kevin McCarthy's district, where you're out in the woods and you can see it, and it's like the light bulb comes on. So when I'm chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, we're going to do a lot of traveling. I mentioned I went to Yale Forestry School. They have a forest that's one of the oldest managed forests in the country with records on it. So we're already planning a trip next spring to go up to the Yale Forest. And, they've never done a NEPA analysis on the Yale Forest. They cut timber off of it every year because it's a private school, and they have to fund the forest can't be a drain on the school. And I would challenge anybody to go look at it and say they wouldn't want to see federal land managed this way. So getting out and seeing things, I brought a group of congressmen through the Western Caucus to Arkansas earlier this spring, and we got to get out and see some private land management, see some of the big mills in Arkansas, and go out on the Forest Service. And especially the folks from out west, they were just blown away that it could work this way in Arkansas, and they were really motivated to make it want to work that way where they live. And we're seeing these devastating forest fires, the damage that it causes to the air quality and to water and to wildlife habitat. And everybody knows there's got to be a better way to do it. It's just Congress is a slow process.
Yeah, I can imagine. But Arkansas is a prime example of the great way, or the right way, of how to do something like that.
Yeah, and I travel a lot out west and visit a lot of tribes. Our committee also has jurisdiction over tribal issues, and it's a stark contrast when you see reservation next to a national forest, and the national forest is a burned-over moonscape, and the tribal reservation is a beautiful forest with abundant wildlife on it. So we know it can be done in those areas, and it can be done properly, and everybody benefits when that happens.
All right. Well, Congressman, is there anything else you want to say or you want to add before we wrap things up here?
Oh, yeah, I just, again, want to give a shout-out to Arkansas. We're leading in the country, I believe, when you look at what's happening with mass timbers, with Walmart building their new corporate headquarters out of mass timber. That's an exciting advancement there. But we also, I think we need to lead on biofuels and what to do with residual material. There's some exciting things happening there. I could spend a whole show talking to you about the biochar bill that I'm working on, and some exciting things in biofuels that I think Arkansas is very well positioned from a forestry standpoint and from an agriculture standpoint. We're blessed with abundant water. We're blessed with beautiful forest, and we're blessed with an economy that can sustain those things. So, I'm glad to be from Arkansas. Glad to have the opportunities that I have, and just really honored to have been a longtime member of AFA and get a chance to come on the podcast, Seth.
Well, we are honored to have you both in AFA and here on the show and representing the forestry sector there in D.C. So thank you, Congressman, for joining me. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks.
All right. And we want to thank you guys for joining us as well today. For more information on the Arkansas Forestry Association, you can find us at arkforest.org. That's ARKFORESTS.org. And again, thank you to Data Scout Pro for their sponsorship of the show. And a special thank you, as always, to Rob McCormick / Some Guy Named Rob for the use of our theme song, The Same Love. That's off of his album, The Folkster. You can find more of his music on Spotify. And as always, we'll have a link to his website where you can get details on any shows that he might be doing or any more music that he has going on. So you can find that in the description of this episode. And join us next month when we'll have a new topic, a new discussion, and a new Voice of Forestry.